Theater. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. All right, we are now broadcasting. Good luck, guys.
Okay, welcome everybody as we're filtering in. We're about to get started.
I think anybody's going to show up.
Oh, I think people are going to show up. We've got 30-something people so far. This is going to be great. Yeah, I think I was told we've got a couple hundred RSVPs, so.
Wow.
I should have taken my beta blockers.
By the way, the painting behind me is done by Anthony Patera. I have about 4 of Tony's paintings. He was a great lover of the arts, and I have his last painting. This is one of his early paintings. He died at 32 of HIV of AIDS, and he was just a dear friend of Susan and mine, and he would come to watch our concerts, and we would go to his studio and watch him paint. And so
it's beautiful.
Yeah, this is it's called this is called Sunshine Over Darkness. Really
yeah, I love it.
I first saw this painting, a picture of this painting in Miami, and then it ended up in a gallery in Laguna Beach, and I was walking by just the sidewalk, and I just stopped and I go, I know this painting, I've seen it before. So it's one of those things that I had to buy.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, I think we're ready. So I'm going to start the video content, and everybody, we will be right back.
Leonard Bernstein said, the way you're going to be evaluated as a conductor is not by being a guest conductor or by being an assistant conductor. It's going to be by what you do as a music director. And you have the Pacific Symphony. You have an opportunity here. This is going to be your legacy. I came at the urging of John Williams, and he goes, Carl, you know, I've just conducted this absolutely fantastic, wonderful crackerjack orchestra in Orange County. It's called the Pacific Symphony. I came out and with a beautiful program of Mozart and the Songs of the Auvergne by Canteloube and the Pathetique Symphony of Tchaikovsky. The orchestra was just as John said. I mean, the musicians were fantastic. They played beautifully. It was a powerful sound. And I immediately called John and I said, you were right. This is unbelievable out here. And then not long after that, in early February, I get a call and was offered this position. And I was just so delighted and felt so fortunate because I realized in the Pacific Symphony that this was a young, incredibly talented orchestra that had a brilliant future in front of itself. Celebrating this 30th anniversary with everybody is a great, great honor. Throughout my life with the symphony, we've been so blessed to have the great musicians, the great soloists come and perform with the Pacific Symphony. I mean, just to think that with the Pacific Symphony alone, we've done the Dvorak Cello Concerto with János Starker, Yo-Yo Ma, Mstislav Rostropovich, 3 of the great cellists of all times. We've had pianists from all walks of life, Andre Watts to the young Lang Lang, violinists that we've had, Joshua Bell, Midori, composers like William Balcom, like Andre Previn, Philip Glass, John Adams. The list goes on of America's great composers who've been a part of our life. When we went to Carnegie Hall, that is the pinnacle of artistic achievement. A sold-out house, 2 standing ovations, and a fantastic glowing review in the New York Times. When we went to China, it was like a really important musical success, and their response to our playing and to our passion and energy and to our encores and to the repertoire that we chose, it was an incredible experience. We now have many very, very important community engagement programs within our community, from Class Act to Arts Express to our family concerts to our children's concerts to our summer engagement programs. This was an important aspect of our growth, not only on the stage, not only with our recordings live, but also the things we were doing in our community. Being with all of you and having this opportunity for 30 years has just been a great gift, a great chapter in my life, as was going to Carnegie and going to China. But I mean, you think we're just going to Carnegie Hall like one time and that was the last tour we're going to ever take and we're never going to have a PBS special, and that 30 years and then I'm just going to fall off like a leaf in October? I don't think so. I mean, this orchestra is on the move. Look at how many board members are still on the board today who continually believe in our dream and believe that the Pacific Symphony can, in fact, become America's next great orchestra. I mean, we have high aspirations. There's a lot more left in my relationship with the orchestra, but there's also a lot of dreams, and we're creating even more and newer relationships nationally, internationally, and I intend to be here to make that happen and to ensure that the Pacific Symphony continues to be the beacon of artistic achievement that we can all be proud of in Orange County.
Wow. Okay, hello everybody. So, I'm Ben, and I am very, very excited that today we have someone who needs no introduction, but I'm going to try to give him one anyway. Our amazing music director, Carl St.Clair. Hi, Carl.
Hello, Ben. Hello, everyone.
Just a few housekeeping things as usual. If people have questions for Carl or comments on what we talk about, you should have a Q&A button on your screen, and you can use that function or the chat function, and we will see it and we will do our very best to get to them. Just want to thank, we've got a few partnering restaurants that, as I've mentioned before, have offered lovely specials and deals for those of us who are participating in this, and we encourage you to check them out. And those are the Hendrix Restaurant and Bar in Laguna Niguel, Toast Kitchen and Bakery in Costa Mesa, Provenance in Newport Beach, Haven Craft Kitchen and Bar in Orange, Descanso Restaurant in Costa Mesa, and Adya in Irvine. So thank you to them, and definitely go out and give them some support. Okay, Carl, thank you so much for coming on today.
Wow, what a beginning to your, it's been so great. I've been secretly tuning into your afternoons of the past, and I've really enjoyed it. You do such a wonderful job, and I've enjoyed getting to know some insights into some of our players, and of course, you know, with the Haynes flute. I mean, I know that you play one, and so many of my friends that are flutists do, and so it's just been great. Thanks for doing this for the symphony and for all of our listeners.
Oh, it's great. I feel like I'm learning a lot. It's fun. So as though people need to, well, people should know, and I think a lot of them do, just a little bit about your background. So you grew up in a small town in Texas. I hope I'm saying this right. Hoheim, Texas?
It's close. It's actually should be in German Hoheim, but you know, Texans, we don't really Germanize everything. So it's Hoheim, but
Hoheim.
it means high home. It's up on a little tiny knoll, not a hill, but a knoll. And it's in the middle of pretty much nowhere in South Texas.
And I think we actually have a picture of it. Do you mind if I pull that up?
Yeah, sure. What do you have there?
So there, can we see it?
Oh, that's Main Street. That's Main Street. You know, that actually is Chester Loffer's store. And there used to be a gas pump there, and it used to look prettier. And, you know, they used to, I mean, years and years ago, that's where we caught the school bus. My grandparents lived down the road. We live across the street. Our farm is not very far away where we grew up. So yeah, that's Main Street. And it used to be a smaller street. They've kind of widened it a little bit, but as you can see, there are not that many people hanging out at the local store. I mean, when I lived there, there were probably 35 or 36 people when everybody seemed to be around home. There were my two brothers and me, and then there was a down away, 3 kids in another house, but that was about it.
And so when you were growing up in a place, you know, in Texas, sort of a smaller town like that, what was your first exposure to classical music like? Like how did that enter your life there, or did it?
Well, first of all, it couldn't have gotten much smaller. It would have just disappeared. But the point being, I didn't have classical music as part of my life. You know, our musical life back then was simply, it was at the Hoheim Baptist Church. We had 25 people there. Across the street was the Presbyterian Church, and they had a grand piano. And that's where I would go and play the piano, but I couldn't turn on the lights. At night I would go in and it was dark. But you know, music was basically front porch music. There was the Moore family, M-O-O-R-E, they lived down on the river. We would go down there on Friday, Saturday nights. Everybody played a musical instrument, whether it was a harmonica or an auto harp or a banjo or a guitar, we sang. So really, it was only just homegrown music. And classical music didn't enter my life until much, much, much later. I was a senior in high school, the first time I heard of symphony orchestra.
Wow.
So it was, and then of course, you know, but I went to school about 12 miles from there, and we had from the 6th grade on, we could be in the band, you know, a 6th grade band. We were driven across the town in a bus, and we would take band class. And junior high, we had band. High school, we had band. We had a jazz band. We had a polka band, which was the most important band in the whole school. Marching band, of course. You know, I would play football, and then I would go change into my band uniform and march at halftime, and then go back and play. That's, you know, we only had like 15 kids on the whole team. So, and everybody did everything. But it was an amazing opportunity to just do everything. And in the arts, I mean, you know, that's why Arts Express is the way it is, because I was writing music, I was painting, I was writing poetry, I was in the one-act play, you know, I was in a rock band. I mean, we just got to do everything. You know, it wasn't like you're only playing tennis. That's what you're doing. I mean, we got to experience so much. Okay, it wasn't great, but we got to experience it anyway.
Was your family particularly musical or artistic, or was that something that really came from you? And
well, you know, it was my aunt. Let's face it. My aunt, Lita St.Clair, then at that time, she basically brought us up, raised us as little kids before we had to go out to the fields in the summertime and go to work. But she was my piano teacher. And she knew who I was as a spirit, and she allowed me to compose pieces. She allowed me to improvise. She allowed me to, okay, I had to do my regular piano work, but she was my piano teacher who really allowed me to kind of bloom into this person and that I've become. And, you know, because a lot of teachers early on in their lives, if you don't do the right thing, the kid quits right away. It's like, I'm out of here. I can't do that anymore. You turn somebody off. That's a huge responsibility, but she didn't. And of course, the big problem with me was the fact that if you were in South Texas and you played the piano as a young 6-year-old boy, your life as you formerly knew it was over. So nobody at school could know that. And, you know, she lived 17 miles in one direction, and I went to school 12 miles in another direction. So there was a good almost 40 miles separating my sinful piano playing to, you know, being this macho kid at the school. So,
yeah.
And very often I'd have to pay my brothers a little ransom money. Otherwise they were going to tell people at school that I played the piano.
That's really funny. I try playing the flute.
Try living in Texas.
Yeah.
We're even. We're even.
Yeah. So after that, you went to University of Texas in Austin, and also studied at and taught at University of Michigan, right?
No, from UT Austin changed my life, of course. I mean, I went there on a trumpet scholarship. That's where I first heard of symphony. I was a senior in high school and I was playing first chair trumpet in the symphony orchestra. First time I'd ever heard of Beethoven. I never heard Beethoven's symphonic music at all. I didn't really at that time, I never heard of viola. Sorry, Meredith. I never heard of viola.
Never be sorry.
I love the show that you had with Meredith, but I had never heard an English horn. We didn't have bassoons. You know, we just had the basic instruments, you know, flutes, clarinets, saxophones. And so that changed my life literally. And the year before I was in the Texas All-State Band, and that's where I met Colonel Arnold Gabriel, who conducted our Hail to the Heroes concert last year. I mean, I hadn't seen him in 50 years, but he changed my life. Wow. It was the first time I actually saw a conductor that moved and acted and interacted with musicians and portrayed music as a conductor in a nonverbal way, in a manner that really, wow, caught my attention. And so when I went to UT Austin, that's when I remember the day a music some musicology class, I heard Wagner's Tristan and Isolde, Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet, both in the same class. I was so angry. I was first of all just emotionally like, what is that? And then I was really angry because nobody had ever told me that this kind of beauty, this kind of music existed anywhere. And that's when I went underground. For 6 years, I just went underground because I realized how little I actually knew. Coming from my background, I knew a lot about farming and how to work on a farm and stuff like that. And until that time, I'd never had a private lesson on trumpet.
Wow.
That my first private lesson was with Dr. Elsass at the University of Texas. So I learned so much, and that's where I met Dr. Declue. I'm sorry, I'm talking way too much.
No.
I met Dr. Declue, who was born in Lucerne, trained in Vienna, saw Strauss conduct his own works in Munich, studied with Wilhelm Furtwängler and Felix Weingartner the Great, came to America in 1938, was Toscanini's assistant with the NBC Symphony. I mean, did so many things and really forgot more in a single day than I've ever known in my life, knew every character of every opera, could do them all by heart on the piano. Just that kind of brain and that kind of intellect, spoke 7 languages. I mean, this was my teacher.
Wow.
And I found him at the University of Texas at Austin, and he was a great gift to me.
Well, there was something you said about, being in class and hearing these, different masterworks and sort of having the sense of having missed out, and it's sort of like, wait, where's this all been? And I think that really sort of resonates with me, I was on the artistic advisory committee a year or two ago, and we worked with you talking about different rep. And I remember one of the things that you were saying was that, basically to introduce someone to music like this is to create a new music lover, because it's impossible not to be exposed to it and really get drawn in. And I think that's really something that's a valuable lesson for us as classical musicians and classical music lovers to remember, is that it's not what we are dealing with, the art and the music we're dealing with is this amazing thing, and it's more a matter of just getting people to experience it and realize how amazing it is.
And I don't mean to make a little downer, but recently, like I just did Mahler 2 down in Costa Rica. And I know we were in a church, people standing and sitting in the aisles and everywhere. And I know 90 people, 95% of those in attendance had never heard Mahler 2nd. And it's called the Resurrection, right? I mean, we were in a Catholic basilica. It was incredible. Just an emotional thing. And I told the orchestra and the chorale and the singers, I said, let's don't play for just those people that have never heard Mahler 2 before. I said, let's also remember those people that this will be the only or the last time they hear Mahler's 2nd Symphony. And let's play for those people as well. And of course, as we are in these incredibly wretched kind of situations that we find ourselves in, I think about that a lot. Some people, I mean, we didn't close our season with Mahler 8th Symphony, because of the pandemic. I've pretty much said to myself that piece might not ever appear in my life again. It comes around every 20, 30 years. So, yeah. I mean, it doesn't come around the corner every time. So, I mean, it's really important. Repertoire is really crucial. And if you think of what makes great repertoire great, a lot of it has to do with, it's a magnum opus, and it's also stood the test of time and of multiple hearings through generations and centuries of listening. And so repertoire is really crucial, for sure.
Yeah. And I want to come back to that a little bit later, because I'm very curious about your philosophy on programming. And we actually have a question I think might be a little bit relevant. Speaking of the importance of music, Elaine, hi Elaine, says, music for children is so important. Is the symphony continuing class act or other children's programs during the shutdowns? And I think, for example, you mentioned Arts Express, and I think that's a great example of the symphony sort of working through this difficult sort of social distance time with that.
Yeah, I don't know if you got a chance to see our final concert of our class act year. It was all about John Williams. It might still be up somewhere, but it was seen in 48 different countries, 46 different states. There were over 10,000 people who watched, and the average watch time duration was over 40 minutes. I mean, wow. This was our first time. So yes, class act finished, and we're talking now about whether we should continue as class act composer next year, John Williams, or should we move to another composer, or should we take John Williams and then let it envelope into something else that John is connected to, like film composers or something of that nature. We just finished Monday our second session of Arts Express, which is our summer arts immersion program for middle school kids. And Susan, my wife, and I were really so happy about this program because it was devised in 2000, and it's in celebration of our son Cole Carson St.Clair's life. And both my kids were arts expressors. My daughter was also a counselor. Allison and Kelly and the team, James, Linda, they did a great job at making a virtual Arts Express. And I talked to the kids for about an hour the other day, and they're ecstatic about it. And they had a great experience. And of course, 2020 Arts Expressors and 2020 class act schools, they're going to have something to talk about for the rest of their lives. And it's going to be something very special.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of sort of taking a difficult situation and finding the silver lining and sort of, you know, finding ways to still make it work and maybe even make it something, like you said, that they'll even remember more as they grow up. So I want, you know, you mentioned John Williams just now as the class act composer, and we saw him in the video briefly at the beginning. And I think it's just so interesting for those of us out here who aren't familiar with the story. Can you familiarize everybody with why John Williams is so important for your connection with the symphony and sort of how you got to know him in the first place?
Well, I got to know him through my association as assistant conductor with the Boston Symphony. So in 1985, I was a Tanglewood Fellow conductor, which it's quite, I'm so proud of that because people like Leonard Bernstein and Seiji Ozawa and Zubin Mehta and Michael Tilson Thomas and Claudio Abbado, these people were also fellows. Marin Alsop was a fellow. I mean, there are just so many. This is a photo of me being coached by Leonard Bernstein when I was conducting the clarinet concerto of Aaron Copland, because on that Saturday night, Aaron Copland was going to be in presence at the shed at Tanglewood for the first time in many, many years for a concert honoring him on during his 85th birthday year. Wow. And of course, at this time, the sad part about it was that Mr. Copland was completely riddled with Alzheimer's. And Bernstein loved to tell the story that he went in to see, as he called him, Aaron, and said, you know, I'd like to invite you out to Tanglewood. We're going to do a special concert just for you in the shed of the TMC orchestra, the student orchestra. And he went out, left the room. His secretary said, you know, since you've left, he's already forgotten that you even were in the office. And she called Bernstein back in a day or two, and he says he won't stop talking about the concert at Tanglewood. He wants to come to Tanglewood. So he came and we did this concert of only his music. Mr. Bernstein did the Third Symphony. I did the clarinet concerto. We did Inscape, and we did Outdoor Overture. And at the end of when Mr. Copland walked into the shed, there was a 20-minute standing ovation. We had to start the concert late. And at the end, finally, we got Mr. Copland up on the podium after this long, long, long ovation. And I walked into the green room with him, and I asked him to sign my score to the clarinet concerto. And of course he did, but he looked down at me in this grandfatherly smile and says, "You look awful familiar." and I go, "Yes, sir, Mr. Copland, I just had the great honor of conducting your clarinet concerto, and I would just love it if you would sign it." He says, "You know, I thought I knew you." And it was just so sublime, and what an enduring. And what I love about this is cigarette in one hand, glasses in the other. But the most important thing is the look in his eyes. Bernstein was always trying to give you something, to teach you something, to share something with you that was important to him. And of course, this particular, what he's telling me there, and I remember it so vividly, he's saying, you know, Cowboy, you're on stage conducting some of the most beautiful music ever written by a human being. And by the way, he's gonna be in the audience. And then he would say, remember, gymnopedes, and then he would give it this little lilt, which is the opening little lilting 3/4 time of the clarinet concerto.
Wow. And so it was was this, like, when this picture was taken, would this have been around the same time when you met John Williams there?
No, I became the assistant conductor the very next year.
Ah, okay.
So this would have been in August of 1985. And so I was appointed assistant conductor in January of 1986. And then I stayed there until 1990, until coming to California, actually.
Wow.
And
and
so
then,
John was the conductor of the Boston Pops. And while I was with the Boston Symphony, I conducted the chamber players, I conducted subscription concerts, I did as many youth and family concerts as I could. I conducted springtime pops, Christmas pops. So I got to work with John very closely. And, you know, it was a real joy to hear some of his great movie music for the very first time on the stage. You know, E.T., Witches of Eastwick, all of these movies, you know, all of these things that had come. To hear the Boston Symphony playing that in Symphony Hall was a real joy. And that's where I met John. And that's what he told me it was actually May of 1989. He says, Carl, I just came from, he came back to Boston opening the pop season. And he says, I just conducted this orchestra. It's incredible. They're looking for a music director. You should know about them and they should know about you.
And I imagine a lot of the people who are in, like the members of the symphony at that time had probably played on some of his recording for the movie scores.
For sure. That was when the whole Hollywood scene in those days was a lot richer, a lot more ripe with performances, and of course recordings. And so many of our musicians at that time were playing in the Hollywood studios, and John was there, of course, conducting. As a matter of fact, our tubist, Jim Self, I mean, he loves to tell this story that his very first gig in Hollywood as a tuba player was to play boo, 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 boo. And that was for John Williams, and that's since did. And he's been John Williams' tuba player, you know, for most of his life, most of his career. After playing
it's amazing.
those 5 notes from Close Encounters.
Do you remember what your first program was with the symphony?
Absolutely. I mean, it started out with the Pathétique. And the reason it was the Pathétique was because the summer before, Bernstein, on the Serge Koussevitzky Memorial Concert, conducted the Pathétique. So anytime Bernstein did anything where I was his assistant, I programmed it as soon as I could because I was so just enriched by what he gave us and the way he did it. So it was the Pathétique, that was going to be the main piece. And then I said, well, let's do a Mozart overture. Let's show the Mozart part. Let's show the accompaniment part by doing the Songs of the Auvergne, which is by Joseph Canteloup, which is in this, it's not French, it's called Languedoc. It's a dialect of French, and beautiful songs. And so we were going to do those 2 things and then the Pathétique. But what happened was the soloist, the singer, couldn't get a visa. So, I mean, we're 1 or 2 days before the rehearsal. Oh, by the way, she's not coming, can't get a visa. And then of course I'm conducting the Magic Flute Overture, and I give this big downbeat, and the orchestra goes, and I'm looking like this, and they're wondering like, why such a big beat for, and Russell Dicey, rest in peace, Russell, we love you, you know that, had gotten it wrong. He'd passed out the wrong overture. And so the first half of the concert wasn't anything like it was supposed to be. It ended up being the Magic Marriage of Figaro overture, because I just said, okay, let's do that. And instead of Songs of the Auvergne, we did 3 of the Mahler Rückert-Lieder and the Exultate Jubilate of Mozart. And so it was, and then of course Pathétique. So, but it was good because, you know, you could show flexibility, but the orchestra was fantastic. We rehearsed in this church in Santa Ana, which recently was destroyed in a big fire, right next door to the Jack in the Box on the corner there of Main Street. And we, you know, we could smell the waft of overly cooked French fries while we were doing a little Mozart. It was great.
So, you know, also in the opening video, you had mentioned that, you know, we have a lot of board members and supporters who've been with the orchestra since the beginning, and certainly since when you started here. And we also have a lot of musicians who have been here, carrying on that legacy. I'm curious though, how do you feel like the orchestra has evolved, either as an organization or, you know, playing wise, since you got here?
So something happened when Timothy Landauer joined our orchestra 27 or 28 years ago. And if I'm off by a year, because Timothy came and there was such an artistic presence that it was a catalyst that sort of changed the whole atmosphere of everybody. And at that time, I would say a larger percent of our musicians did play in Hollywood, and they were traveling back and forth, but their primary emotional connection musically was to the Pacific Symphony. Their primary connection to the financial world and the freelance world, which is so vibrant and so wonderful, wasn't in Orange County with the Pacific Symphony. You know, we were 10 years old, 11 years old. We were young. We were just budding. You know, Hollywood is, you know, internationally renowned as this hotbed of incredible players that just, and so they would, in my opinion, they came down to get their musical, standing at the altar of the music of Brahms and Beethoven and Mahler and Strauss, but then they would go to Hollywood and have this incredible experience. And you know this experience, how exhilarating it can be. And all the great composers and the great music and sitting next to just incredibly gifted players. When Tim came, that paradigm sort of changed. And people started coming to Southern California, and perhaps you, I know Meredith was one, to be in the symphony. You know, your primary role was to come here to be in the Pacific Symphony, to bring your great talents to the orchestra. And that happened more and more. And then you would then look from the Pacific Symphony to see other opportunities in order to be sustaining in your life from that vantage point of playing in the symphony orchestra. And so, and then of course, moving into the new hall changed us in 2006, and then the repertoire started changing us as well. And the soloists that we had started changing the quality of the orchestra. So it's taken a long time, but you know, orchestras that are of real worth and of real merit to their communities and as artistic institutions, they don't grow overnight like a quick growing weed. They have to grow slowly and very carefully. So I remember telling the board of directors at one point, it's going to take 10 years before the first violins, the violin section of the Pacific Symphony is going to be an entity in itself. Because we had openings, you know, I think at one point we had 6 openings in the violin section. So it takes a while to fill that and to find the right voice and to the right people. And so it's just taken a bit of time, but the board of directors and our audience and our musicians have been very trusting. They have also been very supportive and taking time so that the Pacific Symphony could grow really naturally. Because one of the great things about Pacific Symphony is that the community of Orange County and the symphony have literally been able to grow and develop hand in hand, like high school sweethearts. You know, like we're walking into sort of young adulthood together, rather than being a city that's up here and an orchestra's down there, or vice versa, an orchestra that's up here and a city that can only or desires only to sustain an organization at this level. We've been able to grow carefully and systematically in a way that I think it's really allowed us to stay healthy. And of course, the fact that we've balanced our budget now, you know, we had up until this pandemic, you know, we balanced our budget for like, I don't know, 29 years in a row. That really helps. The stability so that everyone's energy is put towards something positive rather than correcting ills of the past.
Well, you know, you were talking.
Did that answer your question at all? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no, it's great. Yeah. And just to expand on that a little bit, you mentioned how sort of the model for a lot of musicians has shifted a little bit in terms of, you know, people coming here, auditioning to join the Pacific Symphony and then sort of making a life here after that. And obviously a big part of that and a big part of how you and the musicians craft sort of the future of the sound of the orchestra has to do with the auditions, right? And I'm just curious, like when you go into an orchestra audition, like if we have an opening, do you come in with a specific philosophy of sound, and does that change depending on whether you're listening to fill like a titled principal role versus a section role? And sort of how does that all feed into how we as an orchestra run our auditions?
Well, just so that everybody is aware, not every orchestra has auditions the way we do, which means from beginning to end, there is no one being seen, there is no one being heard, there is no resume being read, there is no information other than what we're hearing from behind the screen, which is being controlled through a monitor, a person who is monitoring the auditions on both sides. One side, the union is a monitor. On the other side, we have the personnel manager on the other side. So it's really fair. It's really, anonymity is number one. So we have no idea of any kind of information about the person. So it is, in that regard, I mean, we're just doing and using by our ears. That's the only thing in our sensitivity. And just as a funny story, when you asked, do you have something in mind? When David left our principal bassoon chair and we were looking for a principal bassoonist, we had a bit of a time before the audition, and there was a person that played extra with us in a Beethoven First Symphony at the Barclay Theater, and it was Rose Corrigan. And I thought, holy geez, what an incredible player. So we had auditions, and my mindset when I went in was that if whoever is behind that screen doesn't play as well as Rose Corrigan, we're not hiring anybody today.
And no one does, so.
And no one does. Nobody knew it, but we kept hearing this. I think she played like 3 or 4 rounds in the finals. I mean, it's like a lot of time. And this one sound just kept coming at me. It's like, there's something special about that player. There's something special about that interpretation. There's something special about that color on this sound, on that excerpt. And lo and behold, when that person walked through the door, guess who it was? It was Rose Corrigan. And so I got my wish. If she didn't play as well as Rose Corrigan, she wasn't going to get hired, or they weren't going to get hired. But yes, we do have a sound. And that was interesting when we went to Europe. You know, I've spent quite a bit of time conducting in Europe and Germany specifically. And my conducting teacher was also European. So the kind of sound that lives inside of me is a bit, it's not really characterized too often as an American sound, as an American orchestral sound, which I don't even want to get into what that really means. But when we went to Europe and we played on our tour in 2006, what was interesting was that several critics mentioned that the Pacific Symphony did not sound like a typical American orchestra, that we sounded like a Middle European orchestra in color and in sound, and of course we took Heldenleben there, we took Prokofiev, we took Ravel, but that actually made me quite proud. Because I mean, I think if you would take I think you yourself, I mean, almost regardless of what flute you played, there would be a certain quality of sound that would still be you. You know, even if it were an expensive instrument, a good instrument, or a student level instrument. I mean, I think Yo-Yo Ma could pick up any kind of box that had strings on it and make it sound great. You know, so the sound lives in me, but that's been instilled in me from experiences and from teachers, and somehow or another it comes out in the musicians. I mean, I was sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just listening to our Beethoven 5 recording from 2017, and that's the sound that I hear, and that's the sound the orchestra makes. And I also know that the orchestra is so flexible, because sometimes when I'm gone for a while, there's a guest conductor in the orchestra, I come back, it's like, this sounds different. You know, because you had been molded into sounding a certain way by a guest conductor, not better or worse, just different. And I think that's a mark of the virtuosity of the musicians of the Pacific Symphony. It's just that you're so flexible.
Yeah. You know, I think as someone who's now played with you for a number of seasons, I think one of the things I've always really appreciated has been that you're always very encouraging to sort of explore new colors, new ideas, and really sort of let the individual instruments and soloists sort of have that artistic leeway to shine however they see fit. And I think that's really, as a musician and a player, really fulfilling. And I'm curious, like when you're in an audition, you know, we talked about they're completely blind, so you're not seeing a person, or you're just hearing whatever sounds they're making. Have you found, sort of from your experience, that you can really get a sense of someone's musical personality in a setting like that, that then translates to how they play when they actually join the job?
Well, Meredith, I hope you don't mind me, because you brought up your audition. I didn't bring it up. You were the one who brought it up in last week's, mixer. So I'm going to just take off on that because, when I heard a violist playing behind the screen, not knowing who it was, the first thing I tried to assess is the person playing the viola, or are they playing Tchaikovsky, or are they playing Mozart, or are they playing the composer? And if I find that they're not playing the instrument so much, but they're playing a piece that I know, and I know the gestalt of that piece, then I become interested. I mean, this is way beyond notes and rhythms and accuracy. That's already a given, right? So, but then if I can tell what that person feels about that piece, what that person feels about that piece through their playing, then I really gets my attention. So I remember Meredith playing Bach when she came in, that was it for me. I mean, it's like, because as those of you that know Bach's music, there's no markings, there's nothing, it's just notes. And so you have this very scary freedom to do just about whatever it is that you think is correct or you want to express. And I knew what she was feeling with this excerpt, and I thought, or this solo Bach piece, and I thought, I'm getting to know this person's musical spirit beyond beyond the playing ability, I'm beginning to feel what she feels, or at that time I didn't know it was a she, that candidate was feeling. And then it piques my interest quite a bit.
Yeah.
So
well, I think it's really interesting, especially, when you look for these principal string physicians, for example, that we've hired for recently. Oh, my cat's joining us.
Hi there.
When you look at someone like Meredith or Warren, our new principal cellist, or Michael Franz, our new principal bassist, it's interesting to me that I see this sort of link in terms of just sort of artistic confidence and expression that I think obviously must have come through in the auditions. And it's really interesting how that translates not only to their performance on the job themselves, but also as a whole, like how that ends up working with their various sections, and really how much one player can impact the whole ensemble.
Well, and I mean, we love Warren, that, and I've said that to him, how much I respect and am so happy that he was here. But after 27 years of having an artist like Tim Landauer sitting in that chair, to be honest with you, I don't know that anybody I can't speak for everybody, but I'm not sure that all of us felt that tonight we're going to find the next principal cellist of the Pacific Symphony. I mean, I think we were a little weary, like, man, that's going to be hard to find, hard to be convinced, because we were so emotionally wrought and so emotionally connected and so hurt by his loss. And then when Warren started playing, I mean, it was like, wow, thank you. That it came across in that richness of sound and that integrity of interpretation. And the same thing with Michael. And I will say the same thing happened in our brass section when Barry Perkins showed up. I mean, things started taking a different shape, a different color. He had that kind of influence over us. So yeah, it can be, and Jessica did the same thing, and Ted when he plays, and Laylee when she plays, and of course Joe, and we've already mentioned Rose. I mean, every one of those contributions inspires someone else to be better. That's called leadership, right? When what you do makes everybody else sit up and be better than they thought they could be, that's called leadership. You have that. You definitely have that, and as do all of our principals. So
yeah. So I want to play a quick clip. Again, for those of you who don't know, in addition to being music director of the Pacific Symphony, Carl is a professor at University of Southern California. And, I've had lots of friends who've gone to school there and worked on view there and have just, had amazing things to say about their time with you there. So we have a little clip to share about his role there. If you'll bear with me.
Thank you. Very nicely done. All the solos, beautiful. Would you mind we start this again?
I feel so incredibly lucky to be a student at the Thornton School of Music.
The orchestra's just such a high level that I feel like I'm getting really good training for my career.
You really feel the pressure to do your best that you can at every rehearsal and mimic exactly what it would be like in the professional world.
Everybody here is success bound. They have a big appetite for growth and development. They know what they want to do with their lives, and they're doing everything they possibly can to ensure that that dream becomes a reality.
Playing with Maestro St.Clair has just been so inspiring. I feel that he brings out the best playing in everyone. He doesn't let us get away with letting go of a note. Every note has a purpose.
He has an ability to inspire the orchestras in ways that you don't see that commonly with a lot of conductors.
He really likes to talk about the big picture and talk about what it's like to be a musician and build a career.
From my standpoint, the most important thing for the students of the Thornton Symphony is that they understand what is going to be expected of them once the long arm of reality reaches in these hollowed halls and drops them on the other side into the real world of music making.
I'm sorry if I'm throwing you kind of a curve. The reason he marks adagio and puts 60 is because he wants a slow feeling. He wants a really lethargically slow, deep, sustained feeling. One before one, please. One.
I love being at USC. I feel like I'm constantly performing.
There are about 3 or 4 big orchestra concerts each semester. Every other year we get the chance to perform at Disney Concert Hall, which has been amazing. Each semester there's also an opera and a chamber orchestra.
The atmosphere that they've created here is one where you feel ownership of what you're doing, and I think we're all very proud of the product when we perform.
Every time the students walk into a rehearsal hall, I want the students to really feel assured that I am and that all the guests are there for them, for their benefit, for their growth. This is a real laboratory for learning the tools which are going to help them have a successful professional life after the Thornton School.
Hello.
Hi there.
So I think, it just seems so great what you guys have built just up the road at USC. And I'm curious, at the beginning when we were talking about your time at UT Austin, you were mentioning how transformative that was, sort of coming into college and getting exposed to all of this music. And I'm wondering how that informs the way that you sort of have built the program there and the way you approach the students.
Well, I think a couple of things. Just a few days before he passed on, I had my last conversation with Leonard Bernstein. And he was always teaching. I don't care where he was. He was, just a few days before not being with us ever again. And he was still imparting knowledge and still kind of urging me to do things. And he says, Cowboy, you have to give back. I gave to you, I've invested in you, you have to invest in others. And so the idea of giving back for him, flying the flag, as he called it, had only to do with one thing, and that's education. That's sharing talents with him, with other people. As he did at the end of his career, he was with Schleswig-Holstein, he was with the Tanglewood, he was Sapporo Music Festival, young artists, young conductors, young composers. I happened to be one of those. I mean, this is a, listen, since you've just posted this, I have to tell you what this is. First of all, you have to look at the look on Isaac Stern's face. It's like, yeah, right, huh? And then you have to look at, this is Leon Fleischer at a time where Leon had lost the use of his right hand through various kinds of tendonitis. And so he was only playing music of the left hand, pianist. He was a great pianist, as you well know. In his early 20s with George Zell, he made the whole Beethoven cycle recording, still famous to this day. This is at Saranac after a concert that Mr. Bernstein had conducted, and this is in the backyard of the home of Kusevitsky, where with a little glass of scotch in a plastic cup, he is performing in some sort of mixed Yiddish and Hubla language that probably made up about 8 different languages. He's performing a ritual to cure Leon Fleischer's right hand so that he could once again play with just a little douse of his scotch under his hand. So this is a very unique picture that people are getting a chance to see.
Yeah.
And one that I don't show very often, but I'm so happy you brought that out. But that's what's going on here in this. We're actually seeing a ritual, you know, a Bernstein level ritual. But, you know, Mr. B, you know, he just said you got to give back. So teaching has been a part of my life, my whole career, and it's been an important part of it. And, you know, when I think about all the conductors that are really meaningful to me and those that gain my highest and utmost respect, they were also great teachers. Bernstein was a great teacher. Seiji was a great teacher. Mazur was a great teacher. These people taught. And so what I'm doing at USC and what I'm doing at other universities where I've had long relationships, UT Austin, Arizona State, Indiana University, you know, what I'm doing at the university down in Costa Rica with the Centro de la Música, I'm giving back. I'm fulfilling a promise. But I do it because it's important for the future. And also, people gave to me, and I really think the onus is on me now to share that great knowledge, to pass it on. I talked with a group of students. I said, do you realize that, well, can I tell one little story? I know we're probably running long. And every year from Thanksgiving to Thanksgiving, I contemplate one question for a whole year. So here's an example of that question. In 1990, August 19th, I actually conducted on a concert on Sunday afternoon, which was inevitably Leonard Bernstein's last concert of his life. I premiered the last work of his compositional life, and I sat with his 93-year-old mother while Leonard Bernstein conducted Beethoven's 7th Symphony, the last thing he ever conducted. So guess what the question was that Thanksgiving? Like, why me? What, from that little town that you saw, Hoheim, Texas, who connected those dots that led me to that place on that Sunday afternoon in the shed at Tanglewood? And I can tell you, it wasn't wishing or thinking or hoping, it was following. It was being open and following. In 1983, the question was, what is Carl St.Clair going to be able to offer as a conductor in the year 2020, which was at that time a year that was about as far as I could foresee, you know, 2020. Like, what is Carl St.Clair going to be able to offer as a conductor that's going to allow his voice to have a uniqueness? And among the many little, I mean, obviously these are not true or false questions or yes or no questions. The answer was, I will have been personal friends and I would have been mentored by someone who was a personal friend who played for Johannes Brahms. I would be connected to 3 centuries. I would have taken lessons from that same person who was the assistant to Toscanini, who premiered operas by Puccini and Verdi. Through Bernstein, I would have been coached and mentored by somebody who was personal friends for almost his whole life of Aaron Copland, who shook the hands of composers like Shostakovich when the New York Philharmonic in 1959 went on the first American tour to Russia, where they played the 5th Symphony. And I will have learned that 5th Symphony from that same man. So the question is, I am now, whenever I work with any young orchestra, they are now 2 handshakes or 3 handshakes from Verdi, 3 handshakes from Johannes Brahms. This is, and I think, you know, we talk about 23andMe. Man, if you're a musician out there, you need to get in touch with your 23 and whoever your teacher was, because that's who you are. You know, when Leonard Bernstein used to talk about conductors and this different trees and different family trees of conductors, I mean, he's right. And that's why I conduct the way I do. And that's why somebody else conducts the way they do.
Yeah.
Because we followed a certain lineage that's all started with Felix Mendelssohn and Wagner and Richard Strauss and Fritz Reiner. But on the other side was Leonard Bernstein and other people. So the 23andMe for your teachers, it's really crucial for you to know, because that's part of your DNA. musical
Yeah.
musical DNA.
That's I hadn't really thought about it like that, but it's an interesting way of putting it. And I think it puts a lot of things in perspective, which is, yeah. We had a sort of related question from Susan Hoffner, sort of in the time of now with COVID and all performances are not happening. She's wondering, you know, a lot of times students are motivated in their practice, you know, looking forward to the next performance. So in a time when there are really no immediate performances going on, you know, how do we motivate students to continue honing their craft and working, you know, when sort of everything's up in the air?
Yeah, I mean, I was on a 2.5-hour Zoom session this morning with the faculty at the Thornton School of Music and the dean and the associate deans talking just about this. And I've been you know, in contact with conductors all across the country and in other, Germany specifically, and also South America and Central America, just about this question. And, you know, when you play the little clip of me talking about the Thornton Symphony, you know, everything we do is in preparation for professional life after academia. Well, I think we have to realize a couple of things. I think the definition of professional life as of COVID-19, as of May 25th, with the murder of George, you know, Mr. Floyd, it's different. The definition has changed. So we're creating not just people who understand, appreciate, and sort of take forward the past, but we're having to create, and create's the wrong word, help develop a new kind of professional musician, a more informed professional musician, someone who takes the music of their lives and uses it for social and racial and change. We're literally creating change makers rather than followers. You know, before you would get out of school, you go join Orchestra X, and then you get on that ship and you sail on that ship for the rest of your career. I don't think that's quote the definition of professional life anymore. And I think frankly that what we have been doing, though wonderful, I mean, the Strauss tone poems, the Beethoven symphonies, I mean, who wants to chuck that out the window? But I think it has been a bit on the incomplete side, and I'm as guilty as the next person. So in my time here at home in the last 2 months and since May 25th, I've been feeling quite a bit of guilt. And so when we pointed out at the very opening, yes, I love Bill Balkan. My God, he's great. He's a Pulitzer Prize. Philip Glass and Andre Previn and all of these, you know, Richard Daniel Poor and Michael Daugherty's. But you know what? I've been only educating myself and learning the music of BIPOC and women composers. That's the only thing I'm listening to. That's the only thing I'm researching right now. I know the music of Mahler. I know that that's me. I know the music of Strauss and Bruckner and Beethoven. That's me. But there has to be a new me right now. And I have to understand that I'm going to have to stay a main step with that, with the social instances that we're living with, or I shouldn't be in it anymore. So I've been spending a lot of my time. I mean, my God, Jessie Montgomery, if you don't know this person, amazing. You're just lost. She's an incredible person. And I you know, if you don't know Daniel Roumain, if you don't know John, you know, Weinglass, if you don't know,
Derek Spiva,
Mark Bamuti, Yosef, if you don't know these people, then you're missing something. And frankly, I've been missing something. I was incomplete. So my job now as an educator isn't just to expound on the knowledge and the love and the passion that I have for Wagner and Strauss and all of these wonderful composers, but it also has to now entail this new definition of what a professional musician is going to have to be and should be to make this completeness in our life cycle. So this is what I've been doing a lot at home. And I think a lot of young musicians are doing the very same thing.
And I think going like to that point, I think in some ways, one of the questions I wanted to ask you at some point during the hour was if you felt like there are any silver linings to this whole quarantine and all the sort of social upheaval that's been going on. And I think that speaks directly to that, which is that, you know, even though obviously we wouldn't want it to happen maybe under these circumstances, I think in a lot of ways, if we really commit to those things that you're talking about and expanding our circle of, you know, who's writing music, who's performing music, who's listening to music, and expand the idea of what a performing musician is and can do, I think that can only be good.
It's only good. And when Mayanne was on, and she, you know, she brought the music of Florence Price. I mean, that was a perfect example. A perfect example. Now, I love Florence Price and St. George and Mr. Tiggins and you know, Mr. Hale Stark and Mr. Singleton and Mr. Mumford and the list. But I've decided to focus on composers that are living right now, that are reflecting in their music the moment, this moment, nothing wrong with reflecting other time periods. So when you listen to Florence Price's music, you can hear, oh, that sounds a little like so-and-so, or that sounds a little like so-and-so. The music that I'm trying to immerse myself within and get educated about is music that is reflective of social, racial inequality, you know, a lot of those topics that we know and painfully know about. And those composers feel passionate and strong about it. And that informs and I think influences their musical output. And it's something that my passions can also get behind. And so it's something that we're talking a lot about. The Pacific Symphony, I know our board of directors, John Forsythe, Eileen, everybody, we're talking about this. It's on the discussion table of every orchestra in the country and should be. And frankly, if I would have a button and I could correct some of the ills of the past, I would have pushed that button a long time ago. But I didn't understand it. And like I said, I feel guilty about that. And I'm doing all that I can now to ensure that the musicians of the future, that I am now responsible for their training and their development, they have to be complete in that. And
Yeah.
that means more than just playing the Mozart symphonies and the Bruch violin concerto. Yeah. So that's where I am right now, and that's why I'm using my time this whole summer.
I think that's fascinating. And I think it'll be really interesting to see, this goes to another question we got. I think it'd be really interesting to see once, you know, hopefully sooner rather than later, we're able to be in the same room and playing music in the same room and, you know, for live audiences. It'll be really interesting to see how all of the things like that you've been working on and that, you know, the musicians have started thinking about in terms of all of, you know, social justice and, you know, being a bigger tent in terms of the classical music world, how that will manifest itself. We had a question about that from, I believe, Meredith's mom. Hi, Susan, who wants to know, she says, just curious what the post-coronavirus plan involves. And I'm just, yeah, have there been discussions about what that means for our industry and our orchestra in particular, and sort of how that can we can not only get back to work, but really grow from it afterwards?
To be just openly honest, open-end honest, right now with the Pacific Symphony, we're talking about how we can go and survive and to become stronger, more resilient, more creative during the pandemic. Because as you know, we're not giving any live concerts, so we're talking about as soon as we can, as soon as we get the governors and the WHO, the CDC, the governors, the musicians union, the orchestral union, the okay of the players, you know, the okay of our board of directors. Once all of those things have been checked, you know, that's going to be a moment of jubilation. And I think I've said before, probably a moment of jubilation that hasn't happened since Christmas of 1989, when Bernstein conducted Beethoven's Ninth Symphony at the fall of the Berlin Wall, where he had orchestral musicians in the same room from all over the world, you know, singing Freiheit, you know, it's Freude. And so he actually changed the text for that, which means to freedom as opposed to friends. Anyway, the thing being is that right now we're focusing on how we can stay in touch with you, our friends, the people we love, our supporters, the philanthropic community, which we're so dependent on, the family of the Pacific Symphony, our musicians. I can't go through a day without watching a clip of the Pacific Symphony. There's just no way I can do it. I mean, I feel like if I don't, I'm going to be somehow or another so disconnected from my family, this family of 30 years and the musicians. And so before we came on to the screen, I was showing Ben that I was listening to a performance from 2017 of Beethoven's Five, and there he was, and I was showing him on the screen. I need that. That fuels me. I mean, I listen to the performances, I evaluate them, whether we can put them on for virtual publicity. Our 4th of July program was a joy for me to work on, even though it was not a single note played in living moment. So we have some plans for the fall, which we're going to be talking about very soon, because obviously we're not going to have the symphony subscription concert as it's been broadcast, as it's been marketed and shown. So we're going to have some announcements to be made on how we can do those kinds of things for a certain number of concerts. And, you know, hopefully there's a vaccine, and hopefully sometime in the winter, in the winter months, we can be back on stage. And of course, as we all know, we're far behind other countries, Japan, you know, Germany, they're putting pretty much full orchestras on stage, Concertgebouw, Korea, other countries, they're doing it, and they're a little bit ahead of us. And we have some drastic moves that have been taken by symphony orchestras in America. I mean, Nashville, I think, you know, just 1 year ago, Nashville hosted the convention of the League of American Orchestras, the national convention. And this year, they've completely shut their doors until July of 2021. So, I mean, and each state and each county have different protocols, and being in Southern California right now, our protocols are really stiff, I must tell you. And they probably should be, because we're in trouble right now.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, at least for me, when I've been thinking about this whole time, on the one hand, you know, we get to do things like this, where we get to connect with, you know, Pacific Symphony fans and supporters and the Pacific Symphony family in a way that's ironically a lot maybe more intimate than we might normally get to do in a concert hall. And so there's that. And I think things like that, I would personally love to see, you know, the best programs and best things we come up with during this time carry over and really inform what we do even post-virus. But I think for me also, it's been a little bit of a wake-up call in terms of, you know, I remember when this all first started, basically I wasn't playing music with anybody because we weren't rehearsing, we weren't performing, there was no chamber music. And then when our block by block group decided to try something at a distance at corners of a yard for the first time, we were just playing through some silly chamber music. And I think all of us got so emotional just sort of realizing what we had been missing without even realizing it up to that point. And I think it's a really good reminder that music and that shared experience, that shared live experience, really is something that that is extremely personally impactful and should not be taken for granted.
No, there is no question about that. And at any concert, let's say you and I go to a concert and we hear a Mahler symphony. I would say, that music is me. You would say, that music is me. But two different me's. You know, in other words, the music can speak. It becomes a communal experience. And when things are experienced communally, that's a whole different level of ambient energy and ambient spirit that is in that area where you're sitting, in your presence, in your existence. And
Yeah.
So I really do believe that we're going to emerge from this silence, this veil of silence, a lot more appreciative, a lot more respectful, and a lot more understanding of the meaning and the purpose of this kind of our music in our life and in the life of our community, and certainly in the life of our schools. The one thing that really concerns me right now is because I know school districts are having a big trouble financially, and some of them, as has been true in the past, the first thing they look at is how can we cut things back? And of course, the first things that go very often are music and art programs. So I really, this means that all of our education and outreach programs that we have, our community engagement programs, are going to be even more important with Pacific Symphony as we move forward, for sure. Definitely, for sure.
Yeah, totally agreed. Well, Carl, we are now 10 minutes past when I was supposed to let you go.
I talk too much. That's the problem.
It's great. This has totally flown by, and it's been, I hope, eye-opening for everybody at home and interesting. I know I've just feel like I've learned a lot, and it's fascinating just hearing all of your thoughts and these amazing stories. I just want to say thank you so much for being here today, but also, you know, for just being here for the musicians and for your thoughts and words. I think it's very meaningful.
Well, just in closing, if you could give me 2 sentences more, I mean, this year being my 30th anniversary season with the Pacific Symphony, this Thanksgiving to Thanksgiving question, and really what I've been pondering and really taking to heart is the meaning of this gift that the musicians have offered me, have warranted me, that the community has given me, that the board of directors and John Forsythe and Lou Spisto, his predecessor, entrusting me to in a way almost becoming, and pardon me if this sounds too lofty, but a kind of a musical conscience, which, you know, supersedes just programming concerts. It supersedes, you know, just choosing this piece or that piece because I like it or I don't like it. There's a much bigger and a much more important purpose behind everything that the symphony does. And because I've seen what it can do to our community, and we want to really be the orchestra that you're proud of. We want to be the beacon of artistic integrity of Orange County and represent our beautiful place where we live in Orange County in Southern California in the most positive light for all that we do and all that we stand for, and really understand our purpose of being your symphony orchestra. And it's not just to make concerts. I mean, I miss being with Ben and the musicians. That's one thing. And I miss making music. That's another level. But what I really miss is being able to serve you, our community. Because that's why we're doing this. It's not for me. It's not for us. Yes, God's given me talents. He's given Ben talents. And it's how and what we do with them. And how we take that music that Mozart and Beethoven and all these great composers have given us, and what we do with their genius in order to make your life better, to lift you, to enrich you. And so I've missed being able to serve you, and to serve the musicians. So Ben, thanks for this opportunity. Thanks for letting me ramble on and on.
Anytime. This is great.
Can you tell that I haven't been able to talk to a musician for a while?
No, this is amazing. And I really, really just look forward to the day when we can be in the same place and make some music together. That'll be a very emotional day.
Yep, absolutely. Hey, listen, if you see all your colleagues up there in Long Beach, or if you see them online or you communicate with them, tell them I love them and look forward to the time where we're reunited.
Yes, definitely. So I want to, for those of you, if you have a couple minutes, we have a little concert clip. This is one of my favorite performances from the recent season or two with Carl. I want to share and leave this with all of you. Before I go, just a heads up, next week, we're going to have our amazing new principal bassist, Michael Franz, on. I think he's somewhere in here. Anyway, so we're going to get to learn all about him, and I think he's got some interesting performance stuff to share with us, which I'm really excited about. So next Wednesday, 4 p.m. Pacific time. And thank you, Carl. And this will be a clip from Mendelssohn's Italian Symphony from last season.
Thank you all. Be well. Be safe.
Bye. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.